Hey guys, Soulless Reviews here, and today I want to talk about the best of October 2015, where we go over the best albums that this past month had to offer. Now, of course, I'm not superhuman. I didn't get around to listening to every single album that dropped this month, but I did get around to listening to a whole lot of them. So if you feel there's an album that I didn't mention or deserves some recognition, feel free to tell me, and I'd be more than happy to give it a listen. And also, this is kind of a given, but just so you guys know, this is my own personal list. This is what I feel. This is how I feel these albums should be ranked. This is just, from what I've heard, this is the best of. So if you guys disagree with how I order some of these albums or should be in the list, well then go ahead and tell me. Feel free to make your own list, comment, or feel free to express yourself however you want. This is always opinionated, not definitive by any means. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start out by giving the honorable mentions of this month, the ones that were good albums but not quite in the top 5. And the first one of these that I wanted to mention is The Game's documentary 2.5. Now, if you guys may or may not recall, I didn't think this album was bad by any means. I actually thought it was a very good album, far better than most of the hip-hop albums that dropped to this day. It had a lot of cohesion, and I appreciated the fact that The Game put in a lot of effort to make this a very enjoyable project for the listeners that still stuck with him since day one. The only issue I find with this album is the fact that it seems to relate around the same topic of The Game being a gangster and kind of like a blood, and talking about his life as a blood in the old days. It seems every single song relates back to that theme, and while some people seem to find that more enjoyable than the documentary 2, seems to be it's kind of split between two crowds, I find myself enjoying the documentary 2 more, considering the fact that 2.5 just seems to drag on about talking about his gang life too much for me. And of course, it's a matter of opinion. Some of you might like 2 more than 2.5, but for me, 2.5 just seemed to drag on a little much, and I actually find myself not returning back to it as much as maybe The Game intended it to be. The next honorable mention is All We Need by Rory. Now, I know I never actually got around to actually reviewing this album, but I did listen to it actually once or more twice, because I actually enjoyed how this album sounded, and I actually enjoyed a lot of the instrumentals, along with the themes that Rory was choosing. He seems to be focusing more on being a poetic artist than he is just trying to go with his genre label, which is hip-hop/rap. There were definitely times when I felt this record kind of draw itself out more than it should have. There were some points where I was a little less interested in the overall points of this album that he did make. However, I found it to be a very enjoyable project and definitely worth just an honorable mention because it was actually enjoyable, especially for what Rory was trying to do creatively. I feel like he pulled it off pretty well, a lot better than some of the other albums we've had this month, and I feel like you guys should check it out even though it's not exactly in my top 5. The third honorable mention is 5 Seconds of Summer's Sounds Good, Feels Good. Now, this may sound as a surprise to some of you if you didn't actually watch my review, but if you actually watched my review, I explained to you guys that it was more of an enjoyable album than meets the eyes. A lot of people are quick to judge 5 Seconds of Summer, considering the fact that they aren't true to their punk nature, and people easily judge them by making kind of cheesy-ish songs like She's Kinda Hot. But the album as a whole actually expressed some more creativity and some in-depth topics where they actually expanded themselves, exemplifying some great instrumentals while also talking about some good topics, and overall came out to be a very enjoyable album. Although not exactly top 5 material, I found myself enjoying it more than I thought I would. An album you guys should check out, especially if you just hate them for no apparent reason. Check it out. Maybe it'll actually change your opinion about them. And yeah. The final honorable mention I wanted to get out to you guys is Tamar Braxton's project, Calling All Lovers. Now, a lot of you actually thought I hated this album, which is completely false considering the fact that I said in that review it was actually a very enjoyable album, just something that didn't have all that much replay value. I thought the album was actually really well sung and had some points where it had me extremely emotionally invested in what Tamar Braxton was singing about. There were just some times when I felt like she would go from one upbeat topic in a relationship to a very downbeat topic in a relationship, and it just felt very like a roller coaster, up and down very rapidly, and I didn't know if I enjoyed her expressing those kind of differentiating songs so close to each other. Of course, I understood the context of the album. It's Calling All Lovers, thus these songs are going to be different experiences that Tamar went through in her love life, whether good or bad. I just didn't like how they were complete opposites right next to each other, and it didn't feel like she was planning on how this album was going to sound. Rather, just each song was going to be a love song and just going to throw it all together on one album. Although I did enjoy the album, I felt like it could have been better if it figured out just how it wanted its songs to play out. And overall, decent album. You guys should check it out. It's actually pretty good, but didn't quite make my top 5. It was actually in there, but got booted down to one last-minute inclusion. So guys, let's get into the top 5 of this month. Alright, so at number 5, we have Demi Lovato's album, Confident. A lot of people seem to get frustrated with this album, considering the first 2 singles, Confident and Cool for the Summer, had this rock feel to them, and when you actually listen to the album as a whole, it didn't carry out that rock feel throughout the album. It was actually just those 2 songs and other some minuscule points throughout the album. People were frustrated with that, because they thought Demi Lovato could do better if she had that rock feel carried out through almost all of her album. And to an extent I do agree, but also you can't overlook the fact that this wasn't all that bad of a pop album either. If you look at her 2013 album, Demi, you'll find some actually really good music, but not all that maturing music. Some kind of okay-ish music, definitely a step up from her 2011 release, Unbroken, but it still kind of expressed some kind of flaws in that it wasn't all that creative, it wasn't all that bold. However, in the evolution from 2013 to 2015, Demi Lovato seemed to bring it all on confident. She wasn't holding back to maintain any kind of all the teenage audience that she may or may not have. She was fully expressing herself on this album, and like the album title suggests, she was being confident throughout the music she was expressing. While there were some more upbeat, mainstream songs like Confident and Cool for the Summer, she definitely went for a more depressing approach and a more emotional approach with songs like Stone Cold and Father. Yes, this album may have been a letdown to people who are expecting more rock instrumentals, but that does not mean you should look over the true emotion that she was expressing and the confidence she was showing and putting forth some actual great music here, and I enjoyed a hell of a lot of it, and I feel like you guys should definitely check this out. If you didn't give her a chance, you should, because this album, it's substantially better than her original work, and throughout her career she's just been progressing, and this album was actually really, really good. At number 4, we have Machine Gun Kelly's General Admission. To me, General Admission actually sounded like Machine Gun Kelly sat down and decided to actually put forth some great ideas into his music. He wasn't just trying to sound big and booming like on Lace Up. He wasn't just trying to put himself out there. He was actually trying to create some inventive music, and a big step in doing that was totally cutting back in the amount of guest features and doing the album almost completely by himself, and also including a lot of good inclusion of rock instrumentals. He didn't smother the album in rock instrumentals, except when he did Bad Motherfucker with Kid Rock, although I was fine with that considering the fact that that was his moment to really be rock. He just wanted to get that song out of the way, and I feel like he did it fine. I didn't have a problem with it. Overall, the album was extremely enjoyable. Machine Gun Kelly has some great delivery, great flow. He actually finds himself talking about some good subject matter on this album, as opposed to his other projects that don't seem to touch on as much in-depth topics. And overall, I think he took one step forward in his career in creating some more in-depth music instrumentally, thematically, and I think it's an album you guys should check out because I enjoyed it a lot, not just because I'm a Cleveland City native, that's not it, but I actually found myself enjoying this album a lot, and I feel like you guys should definitely check it out. At number 3, we have Wiped Out by The Neighborhood. Like I mentioned before, Tamar was actually knocked out of the top 5 by an album, and this was that album. This was released on October 30th, the deadline for October, but it actually wowed me. I actually found myself enjoying a hell of a lot of the music that they put on this thing. Not only did The Neighborhood aid in giving this really gritty, dark feel to their music when you're listening to it via the instrumentals, but it seemed they incorporated a lot of metaphors and symbolism into their music that wasn't too hard to follow, but at the same time maybe you had to look up the lyrics in order to understand it, and it also left some room to kind of interpret the metaphors that they were giving out to you as a listener. I liked the fact that they didn't underestimate their audience. They aren't exactly a big band, however they don't think that if they release some kind of simplistic music to get some recognition from the mainstream, they're actually going for more in-depth thinking music, and I appreciate the fact that they actually respect their audience. They don't want to sell themselves out. They're going to create this really creative music, and they're going to do it well. They're not just going to completely go cheesy with it. Jesse Rutherford isn't my favorite vocalist. He sounds a little whiny at some points, and he stretches himself to be R&B on this project, but definitely overall I feel like he pulled it off well. If it wasn't for the instrumentals, I feel like he'd be suffering a little more, but the instrumentals helped carry him along, and overall this album was a very, very enjoyable project. I enjoyed it a lot. There were some times when I felt like the subject matter was getting a little bit too, like, he's talking about a girl too many times in this, and it's almost how many times can you make yourself feel bad for the main character, but regardless, this album was great. I felt like it escalated itself perfectly, and you should go listen to it. Great album. At number 2, we have Trap Soul by Bryson Tiller. I didn't know what I was going to expect going into this album, but when I heard it, I was not exactly blown away, but I was extremely shocked and impressed. Bryson Tiller describes some emotionally invested situations where he's talking about the struggles in his love life. Although they're not exactly all that in-depth, he manages to take these somewhat simplistic topics of his relationship life and make them more extreme by giving this soulful bass and coding it in a trap feel. Now, of course, it's not all that simplistic. There's definitely times when the relationship life of Bryson gets a little twisted, and I appreciate the fact that he was going for on a majority of this album. But what got mad props in my book was the fact that he was able to make this album fairly long, but make me enjoy almost every single song on here by making it catchy instrumentals and make me understand what he's talking about at the same time, a clear message, and some good music. Whereas I feel The Neighborhoods Wiped Out had more metaphors, more symbolism, it was more in depth with its topics. I feel like Bryson Tiller manages to keep it more simplistic, but yet more enjoyable, more extensively, like I actually enjoyed and I was vibing out to the tracks I was listening to. When it gets down to replay value, yeah, there's some wiped out tracks I'll go back to, but overall, Trap Soul has a lot of songs that I'm still bumping today, like, Don't, Rambo, and 502 Come Up. Really an overall charming project, and I feel like it really grew on me the more times I listened to it. And overall, great album. You guys should definitely check it out. The title describes it all. It's soul music that's also trap, and I feel like he pulled it off well. Great album. You guys should listen to it. And yeah. And finally, my number one album of October 2015. You guys may have already guessed about my review when I raved about it. The documentary 2 by The Game. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are split between 2 and 2.5. Some people seem to like 2.5 better because it's following the theme of the game being a gangbanger and like a lot of like this gang-related stuff throughout the entirety of the album, while as documentary 2 seems to switch its topics up fairly often, yet still keeping it related back to the hood. And I found that actually to be more enjoyable. I mean, yeah, I enjoyed the documentary 2.5, but I thought documentary 2 was so much better. This album did a fantastic job in recapturing the West Coast feel, and also having a lot of old school instrumentals like on Step Up, and overall just being a really, really great album. Yes, the album is 20 tracks long, actually 19, but there's 2 skits. Yes, it's fairly long, but I find myself being able to sit through it almost every single time. I mean, the beginning starts off really strong, and yes, the second half isn't as strong. I still find myself enjoying a lot of it. It was a little unnecessary to have Kanye West and Future, the 2 features that I felt didn't deliver all that much, and maybe will.i.am on LA, which is my least favorite track on here. But it's been a while since somebody like The Game has recaptured the West Coast feel and retold us why he's so aggressive. Why should we respect you still in this day and age? What's making you differentiate from these mainstream artists that you're starting to blend into with your past albums? This is the album that made Game like, I am not selling out by any means. I'm still a gangster. I am still an original G, and I'm going to make West Coast music and make you guys fucking love it. And I did. I thoroughly enjoyed this album. My favorite track on here has got to be Don't Trip with Ice Cube, will.i.am, and Dr. Dre. That album slaps so hard. It's funky, fresh, enjoyable, and I love it. I fucking love that song so much. Like I said in my review, it's probably one of my favorite Game songs, and I mean, I'm still playing it, and it came out, I think, the second week in October, so what does that tell you? Overall, the album was great. The album, I thoroughly enjoyed it, thought it was fantastic, and something you guys should definitely check out. And yeah, that wraps up the best of October of 2015. If you guys think I left out any albums, or you think there should be an improvement to my list, something should be higher, or something should actually make the list, then feel free to tell me. I'd be more than happy to listen to the album or respect any of your guys' opinions. And of course, which is a given, this is just my opinion, so don't feel too offended by it. Of course, that isn't my main goal, and that is all I got for you guys. If you would like to like or subscribe, that'd be awesome. I really appreciate it, and till next time, Soulless Reviews.